This happened to me, my brother, and our friends. Not a my sister's uncle's best friend story. This is personal and 100% the truth. Make no assumptions. Here are the facts. You make up your own mind as to what happened. I grew up in a small mountain town in Utah, away from civilization up a canyon. If you walk out my back door and through a 200-yard field, you will come upon a river and a small wooded area. We always called these the river bottoms, for obvious reasons. Summer of 2004, just before I turned 16, our house was the go-to party location, always clean parties, and lots of people would show up, and most nights we would end up having a bonfire in the backyard with guitars and just chilling and watching the fire and the stars. Well, one night, we started telling ghost stories. One of my close friends lived a mile down the road with his house, some distance away from the same river bottoms. Discussion turns from the fake ghost stories to real talk about weird things that have happened to us, and my friend quickly takes the attention. He tells two stories. The first was when he was younger, 10 or so. He wakes up in the middle of the night in the dead of winter and decides to go downstairs for a glass of water. His kitchen sink faces the river bottoms. While drinking, he looks up at the window and sees a man's face looking at him from outside. He drops the glass. It shatters on the floor, and his mum comes in to see what happened. They turn on the porch light and look outside, where there had been fresh snow, and there was no man or any footprints. Okay, must have been a reflection, sure. A few weeks later, he's outside playing in the snow just after dark, and his dog starts barking and growling towards the river bottoms. He looks out, can't see anything, but gets a weird feeling in his stomach and starts to go inside. He's about to go to the back door when he hears his dog behind him yelp. Then he comes running towards him. Again, turns around and can't see anything and runs inside. He finishes the story saying that he has always had this fear of the river bottoms and doesn't like going out there. Naturally, as a bunch of young men with something to prove, a few of my friends decide they are going to go out to explore. It's nearly a full moon and a clear night, so visibility is pretty good. I think 5 made this trip. They leave about 15 or so of us just chilling around the fire for 10 minutes. Definitely not long enough to really get to the bottoms and explore anything, and they come running back to the fire. A few of them say they saw something out there, which isn't too out of the ordinary. The fields between my backyard and the bottoms frequently have cows, and it's common to see deer, coyotes, as well as other wildlife in the area. We talk them down and resume the guitars. One of my older brother's friends is sitting with his back facing the bottoms and has been unusually quiet since he got back and keeps turning his head to look behind him. Standing at 6'5" and weighing 240 pounds plus, it was very out of character, and eventually, a second group decides to go out. This time we go inside and gather up flashlights, hockey sticks, baseball bats, whatever we can find just in case. This time we have a group of about 10, which includes myself, and we get about halfway to the river bottoms when I started to get a really dark feeling. I related to fear, but it was so much more, just like something wasn't right. The only time I've had fear like this was when I had a gun pointed at me a few years ago and had genuine fear of my life. Then we start to hear this faint whistle, almost like you would hear with the wind in a wooded area, but we weren't in the trees yet. Then we heard it again in a different direction, then directly behind us, much faster than a person could have moved without being heard or seen. We get freaked out and clump together. We hear the whistle again, and the two with flashlights both zero in on the spot to our left, and what we see just for a fraction of a second is a dark silhouette, maybe 3 to 4 feet high, and red reflection in the eyes. Then it darts away at insane speed and we lose it. Knowing that everyone saw this thing, we all make a mad dash for the house. Getting back to the fire, we decided we didn't want to stay there any longer. We put out the fire in typical youth fashion. All the boys stood in a circle and peeing on it until the coals were gone, and climbed in the cars and left. About an hour or so later, my brother and I get home, and as we're pulling into the driveway, we see the fire in a blaze again. Still feeling creeped out, we go to put it out with the hose, and all of the wood that we had in the stacks a few feet away had been thrown into the pit. Very weird. The next day, we're having Sunday dinner with my parents. Quick side story. My dad grew up in the 50s in a neighboring house where we currently live. They ask if we had fun last night, and my brother says, "Yeah, but I don't know if anyone will be coming back anymore." "Why is that? Do you guys see the bogeyman?" "Yeah, Dad, we saw the bogeyman," chuckled my brother sarcastically. "Really? I saw the bogeyman once. I was really little, probably 8 or 9. I remember I was really sick and had a fever. But I remember looking out my front door one night, around dusk, and seeing this dark shape next to our mailbox. Its head was just below the mailbox, and it was looking at me with glowing red eyes. It was at that point that my brother and I both looked at each other. Did you tell him what happened? We both knew he had been telling the truth. A few weeks later, we again are having a bonfire at the house, when we notice that the river bottoms seem to be glowing a little ways away. We hop in the car and get almost to my friend's house when we see that the bottoms are on fire. We call 911 to report it. It is government land, and decide to go out and see it for ourselves while waiting for the fire department to arrive. It wasn't super out of control, and as we get there, we see that it's just the grass burning in a small clearing. We decide that we could probably even stamp it out. It just looks like a few lines burning in about a 10-foot radius. We get out, and one of my friends starts walking in a circle, following the burnt ash and looks towards the middle. He then starts to climb a tree, and as he gets a few feet up, he says, "Guys, this is a pentagram." The weird thing is that it had been burning for at least half-hour before we got there, but the grass was still burned into a perfect pentagram. No spreading at all. Super weird. A few days later, we hear about how there are people arrested a few years ago for performing devil worship in the river bottoms. They would regularly burn pentagrams into the ground and slaughter animals in the center. So over the next year, this story spreads through the town and it becomes this sort of legend. My brother has this mythology class in the spring, and the final project was to create a myth. The teacher, knowing this story, suggests to my brother that he uses this as his story and gives it some depth. Greek mythology integrated with real life. My brother give life to the name of Nephus Gowan, or Go for short, a story about a mortal cursed by Zeus for an affair with Hera, doomed to be a river demon for the rest of time. But the background story is not enough. He decided he needed evidence. We decided to start the night off the same way we did the first night. Bonfire with about 15 to 20 people, guitars, ghost stories, then gal stories. We called this the ritual, and it seemed to invite whatever it was. After a few hours, we decided it was time. We head towards the bottoms with a video camera in night mode and spotlights. Everyone has their own flashlight, BB guns, you name it. We get about halfway out and the dark feeling comes upon us. Again, I really have to stop and stress this feeling. Fear like you know something wants you dead. This time we don't hear the whistling, but we do hear a rush of something moving quickly and very close. We can't manage to get it in the lights or on the camera, so we decide that we have to keep going. We are still about 20 meters from the bottoms, and there is a small hill ridge that separates the fields from the river. The front person stops moving and asks for the spotlight. He shines it up on this ridge, and standing next to a tree is the black shape with glowing red eyes, 4 feet tall, looking like a child wearing a hooded trench coat but so black that it seems to be made from a black hole. It stays there and stares right back at us. It felt like it was there forever. All of us staring. "Does everyone see that?" with the cameraman saying, "Focus, damn it." Then it slowly takes 2 steps towards the tree and disappears behind it, and does not come out from the other side. Screw the project. Screw everyone else. Panic sets in and everyone starts running towards the house. We get to the backyard where we have to cross a barbed wire fence. Our house does have a lot of outdoor lighting, so we figure once we cross the fence we'll be safe. The cameraman is on the field side, still pointed towards the bottoms when he realizes he's the last one on that side of the fence. Quick panic, and he turns to hop over. We all get inside, and after trying to calm down, we decide we need to see the footage. We watch everything, trying to see if we caught anything weird on the early part. Nothing. We get to the ridge and the camera just did not want to focus. It faces the ridge, super blurry. He pulls it down, looks at feet, and it would focus back up and blur again. You could hear, "It's going behind the tree." And then bam, focus as clear as day. Obviously extremely disappointed, everyone starts up their own conversations. My brother starts the tape over again from the beginning and sits right below the TV staring at it, no talking. He is pausing and rewinding frame by frame at the blurry part, trying to find something, but none of the footage seems usable. He gets to the part where we are almost back at the house and my friend, the one from the beginning stories, just happens to be watching, and at the end says, "Hold on, go back." They go real slow frame by frame again, as the cameraman hops the fence. As he hops, the camera faces slightly into the yard to the left, and standing next to a tree not 5 feet away is a small black figure with red glowing eyes. In the yard 5 feet away from him, less than 10 away from most of the rest of us. None of us saw it, or knew it was there, but we had it on camera. So back in those days we had these things called VHS tapes. You put movies on them, and my brother and his friend edited the movie and made 2 copies, one for us and one to turn into his teacher for the project. These tapes both included the footage we shot that night, as well as most of the story we have told here. A few years later, my brother and I decided we wanted to watch it, but couldn't find the tape anywhere. We searched the whole house, nothing. We did not want to fail, so we called up his mythology teacher who we knew had this tape, and had even shown it to his class and asked if we could borrow it to copy it. And of course, he also seemed to have misplaced his copy. To this day, I still don't go to the river bottoms. I don't like to bring up the story when people or family members ask me to tell it, because I know they'll think I'm either lying or that it was just youthful fear playing tricks on my mind. I know what I saw, and I know what I felt. It was real. And though I don't know what it was, something decided to come and torment me and my friends in our teenage years. And I'm 100% confident in saying that it wanted to see us dead.
I think I might be cheating with this one, because it's not even my story. There are no ghosts in it, no one gets shot or creeped on, but it's still one of the realest, scariest things I'd ever heard. So my brother is at this house/birthday party where literally everyone is underage drinking. The party is on one of those cul-de-sac things, like a dead-end street, but pretty. And what's also pretty frightening is that a buttload of people actually drove to the party and were planning on driving home. The house they were at had a thin driveway, so all the cars were packed into a bottleneck. The night wore on, and around 1 a.m, someone decided that they wanted to go home. They found the girl who owned the car at the front of the bottleneck and asked her to move her car so she could get out. She said she couldn't because she had a breathalyzer installed in her car and it wouldn't start until someone sober blew into it. They went around the party to try to find anyone who hadn't been drinking and couldn't find one. Another guy had the brilliant idea of asking the cool 20-something dude next door to do it. So an envoy of teens head over to the house next door and asked the dude living there if he could please blow into a breathalyzer so they could leave. The dude takes a minute to look the group over, takes a drag of his cigarette and says, "You're gonna give me $25 for every person at that party, or I'm calling the cops." The way my brother tells it, they actually thought the guy was joking, and a bunch of them just laugh it off before being like, "No, really, help us out with this." But the guy was deadly serious, and reappears at the door moments later with his cordless phone, showing that he's ready to call the cops if they don't cough up the money. That dude must have gouged hundreds of dollars from them that night, as they were straight up terrified of getting caught drinking, especially the girl with the breathalyzer thing installed in the car. Like, I get that he was doing something wrong, but the whole reaching out to a stranger for help, and that's the way they act. Like, he could have just told them to get lost and call the cops anyway, but his first thought is, how can I make this work for me? Probably the worst birthday party my brother had ever been to. It seriously sucks that people like that exist. I feel like I should preface this by making it clear that I'm not one of these paranormal-obsessed, ghost-hunting loons that think there's orbs in all their photos. And when I tell you that one of my favorite TV shows is Penn and Teller's BS, where they debunk all those nonsense conspiracy theories and whatnot, I think you get an idea of what kind of person I am. And for years, I went around thinking that science and logic could account for everything, with the only restrictions being the limits of our own knowledge. That was until something happened to me that I genuinely can't explain, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't come up with any legitimate explanation. The whole thing freaked me out so much that it kicked off a kind of hyperfixation in me that lasted for months on end, to the point that my rational skeptic friends started to think that I was losing my mind. But I haven't lost my mind. It actually happened, and as much as people try to tell me that it was nothing but my mind playing tricks on me, I know what I saw, and it just about put the fear of God into me. We're going back to early spring of 2017 here, the time of the year when it's still getting dark fairly early here in the Northeast. It's around 9 p.m. and I'm driving back to Narragansett from my buddy's place in Newport, when I decide to take a shortcut through Saunderston. It's a drive I'd done like 100 times by that point. I felt like I could do it with my eyes closed at a push. But maybe that's what made me so complacent. A self-assured cockiness that's gotten me into trouble on more than one occasion, because about halfway into the journey, I must have switched off and taken a wrong turn. Next thing I know, I'm having to turn into a residential cul-de-sac to make a complete 180, and I'm so embarrassingly lost that I find myself reaching for my phone to check Google Maps. I check my position, mentally make a note of the turns I have to make to get back onto the highway, then start turning off the street as I put my phone away, when bam, there's a car in front of me. I slam on the brakes, let out a string of curse words, and prepare myself for, at the very best, a few scolding honks of their horn. I then start mouthing apologies at the driver, taking my hands off the wheel and being like, "Dude, I'm so sorry. My fault. My bad." When I noticed something really unusual about the car they're driving. It was a legit classic car. And don't go thinking 70s Camaro or something. This thing was a Buick, like one from the 30s or 40s or something. The kind of car you'd expect to see Al Capone climbing out of in Prohibition-era Chicago. And it was crisp, too. The guy must have sunk some serious cash into that thing because pretty much everything looked brand new. I suddenly realized that while I'm checking this guy's old car out, I'm actually still blocking him in. So I start backing up after giving him a nice car kind of thumbs up after pointing to his hood. The guy doesn't react though, at all. The whole time he's just smiling at me through his windshield. And as I start backing up to let him pass, I remember how he almost looked like one of those old ventriloquist dummies. Something about his hair or how waxy and pale he seemed to just trigger the association. Then, right as I'm about to give him enough space, my car just shuts off. The engine, the battery, everything. I jiggle the keys around, kind of frantically by that point, because I figured I'm making a total idiot of myself in front of the dude with the cool vintage car, but nothing happens. Lights won't turn on, engine won't fire, and my first thought is, God, of all the times for my battery to die, why now? My car was a piece of garbage back then, making it disappointing, but not a total surprise. But I'm still blocking in Buick guy, who's surely getting mightily angry after sitting there for a solid few minutes.
So I roll my window down, lean out a little, and start yelling over to the guy's car that he has to go around, but he doesn't respond. And all I can hear is this creepy old music coming from his car. I can't see a thing of him because of high headlights. He's not saying a thing, and that freaking song is making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Now this is the part that really freaks me out to recall. As the situation with the guy is turning into something of a standoff, I'm sitting there in the driver's seat wondering why the guy isn't talking, moving, or doing much of anything for that matter. I don't want to honk at the guy. Everything had basically been amicable so far, so I'm just sort of sitting there, waiting, getting more and more anxious as I do so. That's when the lights on my dash start flickering a little, and I think my battery might be coming back on. I don't know much about cars, but I'll take it. So I get all excited thinking I'm going to be getting away from what had been an incredibly awkward situation. I start jiggling my keys in the ignition again, but again, nothing happens. Right until my car radio bursts into life and starts playing the exact same creepy song as the one playing in the other car. It didn't have any lyrics. It was this creepy tritone loop with something playing over it. But somehow it managed to fill me with this feeling of dread as I realized something seriously weird was going on. The whole time I'm basically being blinded by the Buick's headlights while it just sits there. Then suddenly, the thing's headlights cut out. Right at the same time my radio does, and I'm plunged into darkness again with my natural night vision having been totally ruined for a few seconds. While I'm half blinded, I try the ignition once again, and I breathe a huge sigh of relief when my car comes back to life again. But that little moment was severely short-lived because, as my own headlights turn on, the old Buick is nowhere to be seen. It came as such a shock that I actually screamed out loud, spinning around in my seat like I might catch a glimpse of it driving away. But no, there's absolutely no sign of that Buick anywhere. It was like it had just straight up vanished into thin air. You think with a big old engine like that, I'd have heard it driving past me, even if I was distracted by other things. And the time between the headlights cutting out and me getting my car running again couldn't be anything over 30 seconds. It would have had to zoom past me to disappear from my view so quickly. Have you ever felt super stoned and you don't even smoke? That's what it felt like. I'm putting the entire thing on myself, trying to explain it away as like a mini stroke or something, and it even occurred to me that my buddy back in Newport might have dosed me with something groovy, so to speak. But no, sober as a judge the whole time. And you can bet I didn't drink anything because those Rhode Island state troopers just love hunting DUIs. So like I said, because I couldn't find any way to explain what happened, it kicked off something of a hyperfixation in me. I revisited the cul-de-sac where it happened, looked up potential classic car owners in the Narragansett area, and researched medical papers on blackouts and time loss. The latter had me convinced that I was suffering from syncopal attacks, basically when your heart doesn't pump enough oxygen to the brain, a pretty serious condition, so, as you can imagine, I was only too willing to pony up for a medical checkup. Doctor listens to my heartbeat and checks my blood pressure, then, without any further examination, declares there's nothing wrong with my heart. He did say that the blackouts can be caused by stress, but at the time, I wasn't particularly stressed about anything, so I ruled that out as an explanation. One point, I went far out and ended up researching those UFO encounters where people experience time loss, but I figured I'd gone far too down a weird rabbit hole with that one. But as for the thing that people really pick up on with my story for some reason, is the fact that I did actually have a bit of luck when it came to my classic car search. There was a guy out in Middleton who had been trying to sell a 1937 Buick Special for years. The thing was a wreck, but he figured it might catch the eye of some vintage car enthusiasts who'd find the time to fix the old beauty up. I played it off like I was interested in making a purchase and still feel guilty about how excited he got, and he got his nephew to text me over some pictures of the old thing so I could take a good look at it. I'm not saying it was the same model or shape as the one I saw in that cul-de-sac, but I'm not gonna lie, It looked pretty similar. But it's an absolute impossibility that it's the same car, right? A coincidence, if ever there was one. Yet some of the people I talk to about this will always point out the connection and tell me I should have asked where he'd gotten it, if the old thing had been involved in a murder or a hit and run. Truth is, the guy didn't know. He said his dad picked it up at a police auction and died before he could get a chance to fix it up. And obviously, anything he knew about the car was buried with him. I suppose I've rambled on enough about this now, and I've already made my point that I can't explain what happened to me that night without sounding like a complete fruitcake. So, I guess I'll just do what I always do, and leave it up to you guys to decide what it was. But please, don't tell me ghost car or whatever, because I've been hearing that nonsense for like 4 years now, and I'm sick to death of hearing it. And besides, hypothetically, I did believe in ghosts. I think it would mess me up pretty bad to think that I got so close to one, but still drove away, unscathed.